I think there's been a lot of questions, at least here in Austin, around this Georgia team and just kind of, for lack of a better phrase, how good are they? Because I think most people, when they think of Georgia football, think of the dominance of, 2 national titles in 3 years. But this team, while certainly still dangerous, doesn't seem to be that level of team. Is that a fair assessment or is that foul?
No, I'd say that's fair, and I think it kind of starts with the Georgia defense. The calling card during the Kirby Smart era has been the defense being dominant and not giving up plays. And I wrote about this after the Mississippi State game on Saturday. For the most part of the Kirby Smart era, when you look at Georgia, the assessment going into every year was, okay, if they can just have a good enough offense to back up this generational or really, really good defense, then they'll have a chance to win a championship. It's kind of changed this year. The offense is moving the ball quite well. They scored 41 against Mississippi State, and the defense just could not get stops, couldn't get out of its own way, had some self-inflicted issues in that game against Mississippi State, which wound up being a 41-31 win for Georgia. But it's still a good team. I think this team has a lot of talent on defense. They just need guys to step up and rise to the occasion. They're the number 5 team in the country. I think that's fair, but it's sort of a weird situation for Georgia going into this game. They're it's pretty much a consensus that they're the underdog. And I know at our side at Dogs 24/7, I think we're all picking Texas. And it kind of goes back to what we were just hitting on. I think it's this defense. This defense is not quite as good as the ones that preceded it. And you have to play outstanding if you're going to have a chance on the road against this Texas team.
Jordan, got one more for you before I pass it over to Keenan, and we'll go back and forth for a bit. I took a little bit of heat in the offseason. I think the Twitter account is the Bulldog Report. That sounds about right. When I didn't think I was being, punchy or anything of that elk, Jordan, when I said that I felt that Quinn Ewers was the best quarterback in the SEC. And there were some folks down there in the Peach State who felt that, specifically the Bulldog Report, who felt that I was being a homer, which I did find funny considering the fact that of all the people on the Horns 24/7 site, the one who is neither from Texas nor has any allegiance to the University of Texas is yours truly, but I was the one accused of being a homer. I promise there's a question in here somewhere. Jordan, can you assess kind of Carson Beck's play? Because I'm of the belief that Texas has the best quarterback, at least in my mind, in every game they played this year, and that's going to give them an opportunity, or at least a puncher's chance in every game they play this year.
Yeah, Carson's had a good start of the season, and Eric, I think it's a fair assessment, to give Quinn the nod. I think it's kind of neck and neck, and Kirby talked about that on Monday, saying that he sees a lot of similar traits between the two, so I don't think it's outlandish. I'm very shocked to hear that a fan site, a fan Twitter account got up in arms about who was the better quarterback, but with Carson, he's played pretty well. He's coming off a game where I thought he had his best games in terms of throwing the ball deep downfield. That is very clearly Carson's weakest point of his game. He's not as accurate as he needs to be at times with those deep shots. They did a good job against Mississippi State, hooked up with Arian Smith a couple times, one with Dylan Bell that went for a touchdown. He's playing pretty well, and I think that he deserves a lot of credit for how he responded in that Alabama game. He throws 2 interceptions in the first half. Honestly, only one was his fault. The first one, they had checked to a screen and the receiver didn't get the check. So he throws to where a receiver is supposed to be standing and the receiver is going downfield. So it's just a very easy interception for Alabama. But on the whole, he's played pretty well. I know fans want to see more, but fans always want to, expect more out of their quarterback. He's done a good job. For the most part, he's done a good job taking care of the football. Had 2 interceptions against Mississippi State. Really only one was on him. The first one got deflected at the line and picked off. But no, I think he's done a good job. He's not quite 100%, got banged up early in the year, but he's grinding through it. I think he's done as much as could have been reasonably asked of by this Georgia offense and Mike Bobo, the offensive coordinator. He's done a good job, and if Georgia's going to have a chance on Saturday night, he's going to have a really good game.
Well, first of all, I would like to say my favorite band of all time is an Athens native band in Widespread Panic. So shouts out to the Panic boys out there who are listening. My question is sort of about Georgia's wide receiver group. not talking about suspensions or anything like that. I'm just talking about like threats, because if you were to look at the Georgia receiver recruiting over the last 4 years, it hasn't been at the same level as where they've recruited some of the other positions. So my thought is, who's the biggest threat to go off in this Georgia receiving core against this Texas game? Who's a guy that Texas should be fearing in this game?
Well, I'd give you two guys, and the first one I'd say is Arian Smith, who's a guy that's kind of been hit or miss for Georgia this year. He is by far their fastest receiver. He's a guy that, if folks remember a couple years ago in the Peach Bowl, he has a 76-yard touchdown on Ohio State that basically gets Georgia back in that game. But he's been hit or miss. I mean, he's coming off a good game against Mississippi State, but go back to that Alabama game. I think it was the third play from scrimmage. Carson throws him a deep shot, probably about a 60-yard pass in the air, and Arian Smith just doesn't catch it. I mean, his hands haven't been very consistent. He had a drop on his first target against Mississippi State. So he is who I would say is probably the most dangerous receiver Georgia has. And the other guy I'll point out is Dylan Bell, who is a Houston native. I'm sure he's going to be really motivated going into this game. I feel like he's sort of come on strong here lately. I thought he had a chance to maybe be Georgia's leading receiver this year. To this point, it's been Arian Smith, and a lot of it has been some of the deep balls that Arian has caught. But now Dylan is a very consistent receiver. I thought he kind of turned the corner toward the end of his sophomore year last year. Big game against Tennessee, some really impressive contested catches in the Orange Bowl. He's a guy I think that can make big plays. And I'll go back to that Alabama game. The 13 seconds that Georgia led that game, that it was because Dylan Bell caught a deep shot from Carson Beck and took it to the house. So Arian's probably the most dangerous guy, but I think really it's Dylan Bell. It's the guy you got to watch. If he has a big game, that's going to be huge for Carson Beck, and I think it gives Georgia a puncher's chance against a really good Texas team.
Again, if you're just joining us, we are joined by Jordan Hill of Dogs 24/7. You can find him on Twitter at Jordan Davis Hill. Jordan, let's talk. Actually, you know what? Let's do this one first. I'm going to spoil a little bit of our Know Your Longhorn Foe / kind of Q&A that we do weekly with opposing beat writers. What has been the reaction or maybe kind of response from the folks down in Athens, the Bulldogs faithful, regarding Texas entering this league? Because it feels like, no matter who we've talked to or come across, there isn't a fan base in this conference that doesn't have at least some strong feeling, good, bad, or otherwise, about the Longhorns entering the SEC, and especially the fact that in year one, Steve Sarkisian has them as legit contenders.
I think on the whole, Georgia fans are excited about it because what it means about the competition in the conference. I think people recognize that Texas was coming in and was very clearly going to be a national title contender. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of the Georgia contingent when it was announced that were saying, yeah, come on in the SEC and we'll kick y'all's butts. It's easier said than done, and Georgia may learn that lesson on Saturday night. But I think on the whole, people are welcoming of it because they understand, really, with Texas and Oklahoma both, the tradition of winning that they had in the Big 12 and that they've had in college football for years and years. I do think that fans are excited just to have matchups like this. I think that, to give Kirby Smart some credit, they have generally done a really good job of scheduling marquee non-conference games, playing a Clemson, playing an Oregon, playing North Carolina going back a few years. I think people welcome seeing matchups of like a Texas-Georgia caliber. I mean, I'm sure you guys are excited to see what it looks like in Austin on Saturday night. I know a lot of folks that have been saving up to make this trip. So I think on the whole, people are excited. Again, welcoming in Texas and welcoming them with open arms, but also convinced, well, my team's better than your team, and you guys are going to learn that the hard way.
Good.
Yeah, I feel like Georgia was one of the teams that didn't have as strong of a reaction because they're not insecure about their place in the SEC. I think that's a fair point, is that you've won two of the last three national titles. You're always in it at the end. You have the talent, you have the coaching staff and everything like that. I guess my question would be, Travis Etienne, your top running back. So if Texas were to have a spot on the defensive end where they've struggled a little bit, it would be inside running. Now, they did a very good job against Oklahoma in that respect, but like Mississippi State was getting some, 6-7 yards every couple times they would run the ball. Do you think that this Georgia offensive line, I know they're down Tate Ratledge, do you think that they'll be able to hang with this defensive front for Texas? Do you think Etienne will be able to run the ball? And who are some of the other running threats you guys have?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a big question coming into this game. Now, with Trevor Etienne, the way they've been able to use him in the last few weeks, it's sort of been where he's been more effective throwing into the flat. That Georgia's run blocking really has not been up to par in recent games. I think Trevor ended up with 35 rushing yards against Mississippi State, and we're talking about a game where I think Carson Beck had like 48 attempts. That wasn't exactly what I expected, and I don't know if they felt like that was the best plan of attack, so they rolled with it. But no, I think that's going to be a big question: is can they get Trevor going? And I think they're going to be better off working in ways to get him the ball, like we're saying, throwing screens, getting him the ball out of the backfield and throwing out in the flats, because the run game has kind of been lacking, and we know this Texas defensive line is really, really strong. And then the question too is who else is going to get carries, because Branson Robinson, who's effectively been the third string running back, he's gotten some carries, had the only touchdown in the Kentucky game. He's going to be out dealing with an MCL strain. Sounds like it's going to be week to week for him going forward. But right now you're looking at Trevor Etienne, you're looking at Nate Frazier, who's a true freshman who has kind of played in spurts and looked good when he's played, but hadn't gotten a lot of playing time. Talking about Cash Jones, who's another Texas native, but he's a walk-on. He's played good in the spots he's come in, but not a guy that you would trust to take 10, 15 carries in a game. So I think a lot's on Trevor Etienne going into this game. They do have other options behind him. And even to circle back to Dylan Bell, he's a guy that played some running back in high school, and they used him some last year. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw, even if it wasn't straight carries, maybe some jet sweeps, things like that. They may get real creative with this run game, and I think they're going to have to really empty, throw the kitchen sink at it, because they don't have a lot of options right now behind Trevor Etienne, and I think they've got to be at least somewhat balanced to be able to keep up.